One of my reasons for wanting to make this video had to do quite a bit with the soon-to-be release of Dragon Ball Daima. This new series seems to be Toriyama-sensei's own take on the Dragon Ball GT storyline, likely a callback to it as much as it is a callback to the OG Dragon Ball series. Seeing Chibi Goku and Vegeta was a treat, but seeing that Supreme Kai was going to play a big part in the story, I couldn't help but think, does this mean we'll get a Chibi Vegito? And so that's when my Vegito Hyperfixation started. That helped to inspire this story we're telling about Saruto, and how a fusion between the two greatest shinobi in the Naruto world might change everything. Sadly, all great things must eventually come to an end, and I anticipate this episode to be the end of this series. I hope you're hyped for it. If you are, sit right back and grab some popcorn, because some of the biggest fights in all of Naruto are coming up here. Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, only 25% of our viewers are subscribed, so if you're a fan of the video, please like and double check if you are subscribed. And with that out of the way, let's get into the video. Saruto was punching and kicking, practicing his taijutsu early in the morning as this was something Sasuke customarily did. Naruto, for the most part, was generally still in bed at this time, so the difference here was that Saruto was up and at it, but his brain was only halfway there. Each strike that he sent out was somewhat sloppy. As if Sasuke within the fusion were getting upset at Naruto, Saruto slapped his own face. Walking to the nearby river, he dunked his own head into the cold water and held it there for 5 long seconds before pulling it back out with a gasp. "That should help me keep awake," he said as he shook his hair out like a dog, and indeed it did help. His attacks became quicker, sharper, more accurate. The tree he was using for practice had seen its fair share of attacks. Saruto's shins were definitely sore, as was their knuckles, but this was the best kind of training. The constant trauma to the knuckles and shins served to create small hairline fractures in the bone that soon would heal, leaving behind knuckles and shins harder than before. It was a taijutsu technique used for training in the martial arts discipline sometimes known as the art of 8 limbs. That said, as he continued striking, his shins and knuckles began to bleed. Saruto stepped back after a time, seeing the exposed cambium and sapwood slowly turning pink as his blood soaked in. Saruto was pleased to know that this tree would eventually heal it over. In this way, Saruto knew that even if he were to pass away, a part of him would remain within this old tree to face the future. A legacy of sorts, proof that Saruto existed. But why is it, you may ask, that Saruto would fear death approaching him? Well, for 2 simple reasons. The first was obvious. Shinobi just didn't tend to live all that long. Like, on rare occasions, super elite shinobi like Lord Third could live for insane lengths of time and die happily of old age. But for the most part, all other Hokage had died well before retirement age, with the 4th Hokage, Minato Namikaze, dying at the young age of 24. That, too, was likely Saruto's fate. And while it was true that he was considered about as strong as Hashirama Senju, maybe even stronger with training, one could never forget that Hashirama Senju was killed in battle. But that wasn't the only thing. Saruto was a fusion. He didn't consider himself to be 2 people as one, really. No, he took the 2 parts of Naruto and Sasuke and put them together to make a single person. That single person was himself. He may have had Naruto and Sasuke's genes and even their memories, but he was capable of thoughts and actions that neither Sasuke nor Naruto would do on their own. That made him a totally new being. But that being said, not much was known about the technique sealed into these earrings, nor did it speak much about how they worked or even formed a new individual from parts of others, or for how long it lasted. Saruto had no idea how long this technique might last. It could last for the rest of his life, or it could only have a few hours left. He didn't know, and for that reason, Saruto had been trying to live his life as if every day were his last, because it very well could be. Taking up a towel, he dabbed the sweat from his head and then did the same to the blood on his knuckles and shins. As he did this, he would soon be met by Jiraiya. "Saruto, you're already up." The 2 nodded. "Wanting to get some training in before we start training." Jiraiya finished the sentence with a shock. "Dang, you're taking training seriously. Why?" Saruto sat there and thought about it. "I got it from Sasuke. I feel like there's a goal for me to achieve, a height to attain. I think it's Itachi." "Do you still plan to kill Itachi?" Jiraiya asked. Saruto sat there. The burning hatred within mixed with the kind love of Naruto produced a strange result. "I don't know. Justice must be met, but I don't particularly want to kill Itachi. I mean, I will if I have to, but all in all, I just want justice for the Uchiha from which I'm descended." Jiraiya understood. "Well, have you at least had breakfast yet?" Saruto smiled and shook his head. "I always fuel up after training." "Well, you're gonna need it today," Jiraiya said. We're going to be training to awaken the Nine Tails, so for now, come on in. I have the stove on. Returning with Jiraiya, they began to share breakfast. After this, they started training. So what's first, boss? Saruto asked. Sit down. Meditation. Saruto stood there for a moment, slightly confused. Just meditation? Jiraiya nodded. What, did you think we were gonna gain control of the Nine Tails by fighting it? Jiraiya thought a bit more about it. Actually, we might do that later, but anyway, for now we're gonna work on contacting the Nine Tails. Once we can do that, we can start using some of its chakra to slowly strengthen you. Saruto sat down. So how do I contact this thing anyway, he asks. You close your eyes, concentrate on entering your own mind. That should leave you in a semi-conscious state where you can enter your subconscious mind where the Nine Tails exists. Try it. Tell me if you can contact the Nine Tails. Saruto sat there. This was a bit more difficult than he had anticipated. His mind was a bit hyperactive, a trait he had gotten from Naruto. Get comfortable, Jiraiya said. It's like falling asleep, but not entirely. Stay focused on my voice. Saruto sat there. Eventually he opened his eyes, but he wasn't in the world he was before. He heard a voice. Saruto, can you hear me? I can hear you, Saruto said. Look for the Nine Tails. Okay. Saruto went a step forward, but when he did, he was stuck. Huh? He looked down and noticed a rope tied around his waist. He turned around and looked back to see that rope branched off in 2 directions, and at the end of either direction, there stood Naruto and Sasuke. Saruto walked over to them. They acknowledged his existence, so they weren't hallucinations. Are you me? He asked. Naruto and Sasuke nodded. We're you, and you are us. I'm not alone in here, Saruto said. What do you mean? He heard Jiraiya ask. Saruto began to explain. Naruto and Sasuke are in here with me. There was silence for a moment. Don't be afraid. They're just the 2 parts that make up your personality. Saruto looked down at the rope holding them all together. There was what looked like an intricate knot tying off the 3 pieces of rope. Saruto began examining it. I wouldn't mess with that if I were you, Sasuke said. Why not? Saruto asked. That's the thing holding us together. That thing represents the power in those earrings. If you unknot it, the power will be undone, and you will die, Sasuke said. Saruto was terrified. You mean, if I undo this, and we unfuse, I'll die? Sasuke nodded. Yes, you do best to leave it alone. Saruto stepped back from the knot, a new fear rising inside of him. What did you come here to do? Forget about that knot. Remember what you came here for. But what if you 2 decide you don't want to be fused anymore and unknot it? Sasuke shook his head. We're not going to do that. It's hard to explain, but we're all a single person now. We don't want to undo that knot as much as you don't. It's a new experience for all of us. Naruto smiled. I can't explain it. It's like I'm me, Sasuke's Sasuke, and you're the extra that was created when we merged. Despite being 3 different beings, we're all the same person. I know how you feel and what you think because I feel the same way when I look at that knot. Saruto stood there. He looked down again at the knot. I'm trusting you 2. He slowly turned around. Now, where's the Nine Tails? Saruto began walking in a direction with Sasuke and Naruto following close behind. Getting to the end of the line, they found a cage. Nine Tails? The beast's glowing red eyes opened from beyond the gate. Well, what do we have here? My Jinchurikis. An odd creature you are. Unnatural. Disgusting. Saruto sat there confused. Unnatural? Tell me, how often is it that 2 people are born as one? Not very often. Never if you think about it. Saruto shook his head. We want some of your power. And what if I say no? Saruto thought about it. Well, you're in a cage, so you don't have a choice. Kurama laughed. No, I do have a choice. I may be in a cage, but the bars separate me from you just as much as they separate you from me. And my chakra isn't here with me. If you want it, you'll have to open that gate and take it. What if I just walked in through the bars? Saruto asked. Kurama laughed. Go ahead and try. If you do so, I'll just kill you. That should be enough to open this cage. Saruto looked at him and at it for a moment. He then thought about something. Wait, I have control over you. Total control. Kurama's eyes narrowed. You have nothing. Saruto opened his Sharingan. You are under my command. Both Sasuke and Naruto began paying attention to this. Kurama began to fall silent as he gazed into the boy's eye. He became docile. Sasuke was amazed. Wow, that genjutsu seems almost as potent as the Tsukiyomi. How did you do that? Saruto shrugged. That was when Sasuke understood. Ah, you don't have a single Sharingan. You have 2 fused into 1. You're using them both together in a single concentrated attack. Saruto, certain that Kurama was now stuck in a candy land, decided to try and sneak into the cage. He found that he could freely enter. While within, he began to siphon the Nine Tails' chakra. In the real world, Saruto suddenly flashed into an orange chakra cloak. Jiraiya's jaw hit the floor. Saruto opened his eyes. Does this work? Jiraiya couldn't believe what he was seeing. Saruto, there were 2 whole stages you just skipped. You were supposed to enter version 1 and version 2. I don't even know what this is. No Jinchuriki has ever awakened this before. Sorry, should I go back? Saruto asked. Jiraiya let out a sigh. No, this seems to be better than the other forms anyway. Saruto laughed. Cool, can you teach me that one thing now? Jiraiya was confused. What one thing? You know, that round chakra ball thing. Rasengan? Jiraiya asked. Saruto nodded. Jiraiya let out a smile. Sure. After that, it became obvious that Saruto had already mastered his Jinchuriki state, so after about a week of training, they returned to Konoha. Nothing really happened for the next 2.5 years, so Saruto mostly spent his time working on training and the like. Due to how prodigious he was, he would get the special opportunity to train with the toads on Mount Myoboku, and would even begin to master the Rasengan and be able to utilize it alongside Wind Release, developing his own new technique, the Rasen Shuriken. After the 2.5 years had passed, the events that set things into motion began. Gaara is kidnapped. This officially kicks off the Shippuden era and is the pivotal point in which Konoha recognizes that the Akatsuki are a threat. This leads to Saruto and Sakura, along with Kakashi and Team Guy, being sent to Suna to rescue Gaara. But because Tsunade never needed to return to the village, Sakura is never trained by her, which doesn't bode well for Kankuro, who was poisoned by Sasori. Kankuro sadly perishes, but nonetheless, Tamari tells Team 7 where they suspect Gaara has been taken, which leads the team to a particular cave out in the middle of nowhere. Inside, they find Deidara and Sasori. Because Sakura isn't likely strong enough to face Sasori on her own, she would likely be the one instead to go after Deidara with Kakashi, while Saruto stays behind with Chiyo and faces the Puppet Master. Saruto would effortlessly smash through Hiroko easily with the power of a single Rasengan. But much like bosses in a classic turn-based RPG, this was only the first phase of the battle. There's another. And this phase sees the rise of a new puppet. A true puppet master at heart, Sasori allows the depths of his obsession to be seen when he himself turns out to be nothing more than a puppet with a single living heart at the center, something Chiyo explains to Saruto. So all I gotta do is rip that heart out. Got it. Chiyo seems deeply disturbed by this statement, though Saruto doesn't understand why. He surmises later that it had to do with Chiyo actually being Sasori's grandmother, but at that moment, he didn't know. Sasori would use his red secret technique, Performance of 100 Puppets. This fills the area with many puppets, to which Chiyo is forced to use White Secret Technique, the Chikamatsu collection of 10 puppets. But even with this, she was still outmatched by Sasori, who had her overwhelmed with his many more puppets. This is where Saruto came in. With his physical strength and taijutsu prowess, as well as his abilities he had gleaned from watching Lee, he managed to open the second gate and run into battle against these puppets. They tried to gang up on him, but Saruto's punches, kicks, and dodges were so fluid that one might think he knew the attacks were coming without actually seeing them. And in some cases, he could. The thing was, while puppets had no chakra of themselves to sense, they had to be controlled by someone who did, and that person had to put their chakra into these puppet bodies to make them work. And Saruto could sense that with great accuracy. He would start to thin out the enemy's numbers before finally targeting Sasori himself. Sasori would release a long cable coated in poison to attack Saruto, but Saruto would dodge to the side before jumping over the cable to avoid a sweep. Running as fast as he could, he threw a shuriken filled with his chakra to sever the cord, causing it to fall to the ground. He then reached out and gripped the box on the chest of the puppet. He pushed his fingers into the casing to get a good grip on it before slowly pulling it out. The puppet, though without expression, as puppets were hardly capable of such expression, still somehow seemed to appear pained. Saruto continued pulling, yanking on it, jerking on the box until he pulled it free. The puppets all fell to the ground, Sasori included. Holding the box there in his hands, he saw the red fluids leaking out from inside. "You did this to yourself, Sasori," Saruto said. Chiyo would soon appear and beckon for the box. It was then that Saruto learned that Chiyo was Sasori's grandmother. He obliged her, giving her the box so she might be there with Sasori during his final moments. He offered them some privacy. It was then that Sakura and Kakashi returned with the body of Gaara. He'd already been killed, his tailed beast ripped from him. Saruto sighed in displeasure, his anger slowly rekindling, knowing that Gaara had been killed. But this didn't last long. Chiyo had been the one to seal the one-tail inside of Gaara, and as the guilt built up, having robbed Gaara of some semblance of a normal life, she felt indebted to him to restore it. And so, using her technique, she gave up her life so he might live, this time without his tailed beast. After this, Team Kakashi and Team Guy returned to Konoha. Once there, they spent some time resting until Hiruzen declared that the Akatsuki were public enemy number 1. Their bounties were boosted in the bingo book. It was at about this time that Itachi would send for Sasuke. Saruto would read the letter, bidding him to come to the Uchiha hideout for their final battle. Saruto would go. At about that time, Hidan and Kakuzu were both being faced. This resulted in the death of Asuma, but Hidan would be defeated by Shikamaru and Kakuzu would be defeated by Kakashi. Meanwhile, Saruto would wander through the woods until he reached the hideout. Entering it, he found Itachi waiting there for him. Itachi sat forward. Sasuke? No, you're not Sasuke. Who are you? Saruto stood there for a moment and looked at his own hand. I am Sasuke, but also I'm not. We are Saruto. Sasuke and Naruto have merged together to take you down. You've what? Itachi asked in both curiosity and concern. Saruto continued. You've been gone for a long time, so you wouldn't know about this ninjutsu. Our two strengths aren't just added together, they're significantly magnified. Itachi sat there. So, are you still Sasuke? Saruto stared at him in confusion. What difference does that make to you? Or are you afraid that now that I only have one Sharingan, you'll be unable to replace your own failing eyes? Itachi sat silently there for a moment. Saruto rolled his eyes and sighed. Tsukiyomi, you're trying that? Itachi's eyes widened a bit. You knew? I knew. I diffused it. I'm not gonna fall under your spell again. Whether you want it or not, you and I are going to fight. You killed the Uchiha. Your debt has come due. Justice is knocking, and I'm not taking no for an answer. Itachi stood. At least tell me you've awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan. Saruto shook his head. I won't need it to defeat you. Itachi let out a sigh. How ignorant. Then come face me. Saruto began walking forward. Itachi matched his stride and his speed. Slowly, the two increased their walking speed until they entered a trot and then a full-on dash. They ran at each other. Itachi went in for a punch, but Saruto, with great agility, jumped over his fist and landed on the other side, proceeding to punch Itachi in the stomach, sending him skidding back. Itachi hit the ground and vomited some blood. He sat there for a moment before looking up. Gah? Saruto smiled. Was that too much for you? You could just give up now. Surrender and I promise you'll face a fair trial. Itachi stood. It seems I'm going to have to turn this up a notch. He activated his Mangekyo Sharingan. Once more, he rushed towards Saruto with another punch. Saruto blocked it and retaliated, only for his fist to strike the ribs of a Crimson Susanoo. Itachi managed to sweep Saruto's legs. Saruto began to fall down, but stopped right before he hit the ground, catching himself on his hand. He flipped backwards to escape, only for the ethereal hand of a skeleton to reach out and grab him. The Susanoo smashed Saruto into a wall and then punched through the roof, holding Saruto still. Saruto was beginning to bleed. He hadn't expected this. Was this truly the power of the Mangekyo Sharingan? It was amazing. Itachi climbed out with his Susanoo. The armored chakra cloak surrounded him as he threw him across the roof of the hideout. Saruto skidded to a stop. As he sat there, Saruto looked over and saw Itachi walking toward him slowly. Now, I know how you destroyed the Uchiha. Itachi spoke. The power of the Mangekyo Sharingan is invincible, and my Susanoo is impenetrable. You should have been willing to make a sacrifice. Without sacrifice, there can be no victory. Saruto rose to his feet again. I've sacrificed enough. More than anyone should ever have to. I'm not gonna let your bluster drive me off. Today, justice comes for you, Itachi. Saruto suddenly began digging into deeper power. A golden aura appeared around him that transformed into the Nine-Tails chakra cloak. Saruto rushed in with great speed, smashing into the Susanoo, bouncing off the side of it. The Susanoo swung its fists at Saruto, but Saruto dodged and rolled to the side. He tried to break through the skeleton's ribs, trying to pass between it. But as if knowing what Saruto was trying to do, Itachi covered it and entered its second armored stage. Like this, there were no gaps in the armor. It was equally impenetrable, but now it possessed two weapons, the Yata Mirror and the Blade of Tatsuka. Now, of course, Saruto doesn't know what either of these things are, which is dangerous, because regardless of his strength right now, that blade can and will seal him away if he's struck by it. But here's the fun part. Saruto's gonna be avoiding that thing like the plague, because even if he doesn't know what it can do, guess what? When you see a flaming sword, your first instinct is, I'm not gonna touch that. And so, Saruto indeed does not touch that. But the mirror, he's quick to attack. He rushes in and tries to smash it, but realizes that it simply negates his ninjutsu attacks. As it stands, it looks as though Itachi's Susanoo is truly impenetrable, but Saruto is not done yet. He steps back and begins to power up as much as he can. Sending a shadow clone off into the distance, it begins to take in nature energy and enter Sage Mode. Saruto keeps Itachi busy during this time. After it's ready, it returns to Saruto, awakening his Sage Mode on top of his Nine-Tails Chakra Mode. But even still, Saruto is skeptical that this power would break through the Susanoo, so he also throws on top of it the third gate, the highest gate he knows how to open. With this, he rushes in with a Rasengan packed as densely as he could make it. He dodges the blade of Totsuka a couple times before smashing his Rasengan into the mirror, breaking completely through it and smashing through the Susanoo as well. This heavily slows down his momentum, but allows him to still strike Itachi with the Rasengan, sending him flying. Itachi rolls before coming to a stop, laying there. Saruto gasps and heaves, trying to catch his breath, dropping out of Sage Mode and the third gate, though continuing in his Ninetales Chakra mode. His muscles feel like they're tearing. He uses the chakra of the Ninetales to heal himself. He begins to walk over to Itachi. "All right, get up. I know I didn't hit you that hard. I even held back when I got down to you." Itachi coughs as blood exits his mouth. Saruto kneels down beside him. "Hey, are you okay? I didn't think I hit you that hard." "You didn't," he said as he laid there. He was wheezing. Saruto sat there for a moment. "You're not okay, are you?" Itachi shook his head. "Turns out I have cystic fibrosis. Been slowly killing me for a while now. Use of my Mangekyo Sharingan makes it worse." Saruto sat there for a moment. "Is that why you wanted my Sharingan? Were you trying to awaken my Mangekyo that night you killed everyone, so you wouldn't die?" Itachi sat there silently for a moment before saying, "Yes." Saruto shook his head. "You know I loved you, right? That I would have given anything to help you, including my own eyes. You didn't have to do that." Itachi looked over. "It's why I wanted your Mangekyo, but that wasn't it only. I wanted to see..." "See what?" Itachi sat there for a moment, wheezing, before continuing. "If I could do it. You killed everyone, just to see if you could?" Itachi smiled. "I was always the strongest, and then I knew by how much. I knew you had potential, but I never figured you would merge your potential with someone else." "Huh. Huh. Disgusting," Saruto said. "You're truly despicable." "It doesn't really matter now," Itachi said. "I'm dying. You got your justice. Now flaunt your victory back in Konoha." Saruto sat there for a moment. He sighed. He held Itachi's head up. What are you doing?" Itachi asked. Saruto rested Itachi's head against his leg. "If you're dying, I might as well be here with you while you go. You may be a total bastard, but you're my total bastard." Itachi was moved by this to the point where he started to cry. Saruto looked down. "What are you crying about? You're scared to die?" Itachi shook his head. "Why are you being kind to me? I killed everyone you love." Saruto was silent for a moment before he spoke. "Because I don't want to live ugly anymore. You told me to live ugly and I did. Then, when Naruto and I fused, I saw things in a new light. I don't want to live a grudge. I want to be alive. When I go home after this, I want to do so without regrets, and I think I'll be able to sleep at night better knowing that even after everything you did to me, I could at least make sure that your death was an easy one, and that you were comfortable and not alone." Itachi then spoke. "I'm sorry, Sasuke. I didn't want to do what I did." Saruto looked down. "What do you mean?" Itachi spoke. "The Uchiha were going to try and overthrow everything. This would have led to a civil war that would have seen the Hidden Leaf decimated. The Leaf ordered a surgical strike, and Danzo commanded that I be the one to destroy the Uchiha, saying that if I did, he would spare you. But if I failed, he would have killed you too, along with me." Saruto's eyes widened. "Wait, what?" Itachi spilled the beans, telling Saruto everything. "Why didn't you tell me before?" Saruto asked. "I wanted you to hate me. I wanted you to kill me and take your place as the hero of the village without being haunted by your actions." "You're an idiot," Saruto said. "I would have rather died with you than survive as I did, being responsible for this." Itachi's breathing grew labored. Saruto calmed down. He pulled Itachi closer to him. "It's okay. I forgive you. Just forget about it. You know I love you, right?" There was no response. "Itachi?" Itachi had passed away. Saruto grit his teeth as tears began to drop from his eyes. "Itachi!" In that moment, his swirling emotions awakened within him the Mangekyo Sharingan, but something else awakened as well. Sasuke and Naruto's chakras had been merged together during the time of their Potara fusion. They had been far stronger than either of them originally believed. And only here, now that the Mangekyo Sharingan had awakened, did their bodies acknowledge that they were ready to awaken that dojutsu. As soon as the Mangekyo awakened, it was quickly overshadowed by a Rinnegan, its Tomoe offering a path back to the earlier two variations of the dojutsu from which it spawned. A single eye that had been a Sharingan when it came to this forgotten fortress had become a Rinnegan as he left it. Saruto, of course, had no clue why, nor did anyone else in the village once he returned. Most chalked it up to Saruto being a Mary Sue again, but none could have known that it was because his fusees were themselves reincarnations of Indra and Ashura, and were thus possessing perfect compatibility with this technique. As soon as Saruto returned to Konoha, he thought about what had happened. about the Uchiha massacre. What happened that night was wrong. Everything was wrong. Everyone was killed. Men, women, children, and they forced one of their own to do it. That itself was an injustice. Saruto went straight to Hiruzen about it. This was wrong, Hiruzen. This was a war crime that was committed against the Leaf's own villagers. Hiruzen sat there. Saruto thought about it. I get why you would have had to put down the insurrection like you did, but to kill innocents as well. I know you didn't do it, but you covered it up and made excuses for the one who did. That makes you an accessory to it. Hiruzen sat there for a moment. You're right. So what happens now? Saruto paced back and forth and ran his fingers through his hair. There needs to be accountability. We need justice, Hiruzen. The Uchiha deserve it. I deserve it. The village needs to know what happened, and there needs to be consequences for those involved. Hiruzen nodded. I understand. After this conversation, Hiruzen would confess the incident to the people, explaining what happened and why he acted as such. To this end, Danzo Shimura was imprisoned, and Hiruzen himself stepped down, passing the torch to Jiraiya. Hiruzen, due to his confession and stepping down, as well as due to how he did not personally have the Uchiha killed, was given leniency according to Saruto's desires. He was not imprisoned, though he proceeded to live the rest of his life in disgrace. Things began to calm down. Sakura was a real source of comfort for Saruto at this point, her kindness and love soothing his spirit. But as the days continued to pass, an event nobody expected transpired. The Leaf came under attack by Pain. As Pain's 6 paths began to run amok, the Diva Path hovered above the village, pushing his hand out, ready to decimate it with a single Shinra Tensei. He had not realized that Saruto was below, ready to do the same back in his direction. The two almighty pushes met each other mid-air and caused the blast to be spread out harmlessly across the sky. Pain was confused. Slowly, Saruto rose up to meet him, hovering the same way Pain was. Saruto hovered there across from Pain, his arms crossed. You looking for someone? It was common knowledge at this point that the Akatsuki were looking for tailed beasts, and Pain knew that Saruto knew, so he said nothing. Don't be shy, Saruto said. Come on, tell me what you want. You want me, don't ya? Well, now you have me, so take the precious tailed beast you want. Pain would form a chakra rod in his hand. If you are searching for a fight, I will provide it for you. Pain struck out at Saruto, but Saruto formed a blade from his hand using the Ashura path to catch it. You have no idea how truly outmatched you are, he said to Diva. You think you're so powerful, but you spread your power out among 6 people. What I'm facing now is only 1/6 of the power of the Rinnegan. Meanwhile, I'm using 100% of its power. Suddenly, a Susanoo fist appeared out of thin air and smashed Pain, sending him to the ground. Saruto lowered to face him. I'm also using 100% of my Mangekyo Sharingan. With this Rinnegan, I don't even have to switch to my Mangekyo to use its power. You're so outmatched, it's not even funny. I'm not even using Sage Mode or Ninetales Chakra Mode. You're cooked. Suddenly, from behind, Obito appeared and attempted to attack him. Saruto tried to grab his hand, but it passed right through his grip as if nothing even happened. He reached in and grabbed some of the Ninetales Chakra, pulling it free. Saruto stumbled back a bit, trying to understand how this worked. Saruto began analyzing Obito with his Rinnegan, trying to understand what he did. Give that back, he shouted as he rushed at Obito, trying to grab the man, but as soon as he tried, the man disappeared. It was then that Saruto understood. Space-time ninjutsu, a dojutsu ability. Saruto felt within himself. A part of Kurama's chakra had been stolen, but not all of it. The main part of the beast was still in him, but he had lost a significant portion of its chakra, half at least. Kurama would regenerate. Wow, your friend took quite a bit of chakra from me. Still, Saruto turned to face Pain. I have more than enough to take you on with your little boy band. And it was then that the other paths of Pain converged on Saruto. Saruto looked around at them and smiled. Bring it on. As the human path ran in, it attempted to grab his soul and rip it out, but Saruto utilized the Ashura path to form a large chakra cannon on his arm that he fired to blow the human path apart. As the Predapath grabbed Saruto from behind, Saruto also activated his Predapath. The chakra that Pain's Predapath was trying to steal from Saruto was itself being re-stolen again by Saruto using the same ability. He grabbed the Predapath's arm and threw him over his shoulder before blasting him away with the same chakra cannon he used before. Then came the Ashura paths, attempting to do the same thing to Saruto that Saruto was doing to the others. Saruto would hold out his hand and use the Predapath to absorb the blast, and then redirected it into the Naraka path before forming a bladed whip with his hand and swinging it at Ashura. Once the bladed whip had wrapped around Ashura, Saruto gave a quick, forceful yank to sever the Ashura path to pieces. He ran toward the animal path and slammed it onto the ground, As he did this, Pain's Diva Path was in the air, preparing a Chibaku Tensei, throwing it to the ground. Saruto looked up at it and used the Ashura Path to turn his feet into rockets, propelling himself up toward it. He then used the Ashura Path as he raised his arms to combine them into a drill. He began spinning rapidly. He hit the Chibaku Tensei to begin drilling through it. Once he pierced the core, it exploded. Diva had no time to react as the drill smashed through him as well, shredding him to pieces. Saruto would then land on the ground and take up one of the few remaining chakra rods and tried to follow it back to its source. The moment that he did, of course, he was met with an astounding sight. Konan and Nagato both had been killed already, Nagato's eyes removed from his skull. It was then that Saruto knew that Nagato had likely been killed by the man in the swirling mask. He'd report this to Jiraiya, who would call a 5 Kage summit. There, the various nations would agree to work together to find and stop Obito from completing his plans. However, despite Kumo's attempts, Obito managed to get at least a little bit of the 8 Tails chakra from Killer Bee. With this, he was ready to awaken the 10 Tails. So, the allied shinobi forces scrambled to find the 10 Tails and ended up entering into combat with the Zetsu forces. Eventually, they discovered the location of the Geto statue and get there just as Obito is finishing putting the final bit of the 9 Tails into it. This awakens the 10 Tails and it goes on a rampage. But knowing that Saruto has a Rinnegan, Obito is quick to absorb it. Once absorbed, he faces off against the allied shinobi forces. Saruto personally faces off against Obito while the Zetsu fight the forces behind him. As their fists clash with each other, it's obvious how close they are to a match. Saruto activates his 9 Tails chakra mode on top of Sage mode and throws in his 3rd gate of life just to even the playing field a bit more. Together, their power manages to push back Obito. Obito is astounded that these two have this much power. Having thought he could get away with not using it, Obito begins to utilize his Kamui, but Saruto is no idiot. He saw how Obito had done this in the past. Since then, he tested his own Rinnegan and has found out how to utilize space-time ninjutsu. He continues to fight against Obito, his fists passing through. His attacks may be doing no damage, but every time they pass through, he learns their spatial and temporal coordinates. Eventually, Saruto's fists can follow Obito into the dimension and strike him. Black Zetsu, knowing that he can't wait any longer, decides to bond with Obito and immediately turn him into Kaguya. He had wanted to wait until the infinite Tsukiyomi had begun, as the influx of chakra would have helped his mother to grow stronger faster, but as it turns out, he would have to push up the timetable a bit if he wanted her to return at all. And so he covers Obito and begins to awaken Kaguya inside of him. Obito loses control and continues to expand until eventually he ruptures into Kaguya herself. Kaguya stands there before Saruto, who is confused as to who this woman is. Kaguya looks at Saruto closely and squints. Hagoromo? Saruto stands there in shock. Who are you? The woman's expression returns to normal. She would then utilize her technique Amena Minaka to teleport them all to a different dimension, or rather more like teleporting another dimension to them. Saruto is in awe of the power of this jutsu. The woman is still a bit confused as to what's going on here. You're not Hagoromo, are you? You feel like Hagoromo, and you possess his eye, but that's where the similarities end. I must know. Suddenly she casts them into a genjutsu with her Rinne Sharingan and enters their mind. There she sees Saruto in his subconscious, along with Sasuke and Naruto. Strange. You possess 3 people in your mind. Is it possible that, like me, you have fused with another being? As I fused with the 10 Tails, have the sons of Hagoromo fused into this new one? Her nose scrunches up in annoyance. With a shot of her all-killing ash bones, she severs the rope holding them all together. That should end this, she says. She leaves the mind as the subconscious begins to fall apart. Saruto watches as the rope holding them all together disintegrates. No. No, 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 no! He falls to his knees as Sasuke and Naruto rush to him. Saruto realizes that this is the end. He looks up at Sasuke and Naruto. I don't want to go. Sasuke and Naruto look at each other and then back to Saruto. They both hug Saruto as tears begin to roll down his cheeks. There was so much I wanted to do. Sasuke then spoke. I wanted to spend the rest of my life with Sakura, and now I never will. He pulled back for a moment. Promise me something. Anything, Sasuke and Naruto said in unison. Saruto wiped his tears. Promise me that you'll stop Kaguya. Save our world. Don't let my death be for nothing. Sasuke and Naruto nodded. We will. Saruto looked down as he began to fade away. I'm gonna miss you two. Please, tell the others to remember me. And as he said that, the fusion between Sasuke and Naruto ended. In Kaguya's dimension, Saruto popped apart back into Sasuke and Naruto. Kaguya looked at the 2 pathetic shinobi. I do not know what that technique was, but it seems to have been all that allowed you to face my power in that Uchiha boy. The two tried to fight her, but it became obvious that they would lose. As they both lay there on the ground, ready to face defeat, they saw Kaguya's final attack, a wave of all-killing ash bones that they simply couldn't avoid. It was then that the two of them were suddenly teleported out. Kaguya was confused and searched for their chakras elsewhere, but couldn't find them. Disregarding them for the time being, she returned to Earth where she prepared to cast the infinite Tsukiyomi. Elsewhere though, Sasuke and Naruto found themselves in a strange dimension. "Where are we?" Naruto asked. "Hi there," a peppy voice said from behind. Naruto and Sasuke turned around to see another being floating there, legs crossed and smiling. "Who are you?" Sasuke asked. "I'm Fu. I'm the guy that gave you those earrings in the first place." Naruto and Sasuke were shocked. "That was you?" they both said in unison. Fu nodded. "Yeppers, that was me. I wanted to know how the world would turn out if I did that. Certainly was interesting, but sadly now it looks like it'll all end. Unless you give us another pair of those earrings," Sasuke said. "Can we have another pair, purple guy?" Naruto asked. Fu looked at Naruto. "First of all, that's racist. Second of all, no, I can't. I only managed to snatch a spare pair from the Supreme Kai of Time, and she's pretty pissed about it. Don't think she'll lend me another one. Sorry." "Damn it," Naruto said as he fell to his knees. "So that's it? It's over?" Sasuke asked. Fu nodded. "Sad as it seems, yes it is. Unless..." Naruto looked up. "Unless? Unless what?" "Nah, I don't think you'll be able to. Besides, I don't think you would want to pay the price." "Price?" Sasuke asked. Fu nodded. "Price. Everything I do for you comes with a cost. And just as I'm sharing abilities and powers with you, I expect you to do so in the future. Your world is interesting. I got to see how your world works while interacting with something from mine. I want to know how my world works while interacting with something from yours." Naruto and Sasuke looked at each other. "You're gonna want something in return?" Naruto asked. Fu nodded. "And what'll that be?" Fu smiled. Kaguya continued her assault. The allied shinobi forces attempted to attack her, but they were no match. She sighed. "I was wrong to allow you all to survive. Now it seems that I have no choice but to take back what was mine all along." She waited as the moon rose. "I will cast the infinite moon dream and reclaim what is mine." The allied shinobi forces pushed back even harder. Kaguya retaliated with her 80 gods vacuum attack. As the attacks came in, they began to decimate the allied shinobi forces. As Kakashi and Sakura saw them come in, there was nothing they could do to avoid or deflect these attacks. They prepared to meet their end. That was until suddenly they appeared. A being with dark hair appeared before them, wearing only a short vest, baggy pants, and a blue sash around their waist. "Are you alright?" a dual voice asked. "Saruto?" Sakura asked. The being looked down. "Yeah, that's right. During our time fused with Patara, our name was Saruto, wasn't it? But now we're fused a different way. Should we have a different name now? Sasuto? Narutosuke? Nasuke. What are you talking about? Sakura asked. Nasuke looked back. A mysterious being from another world taught us a special dance that would allow us to fuse like the Potara did after Kaguya split our fusion. But the downside is that it only lasts for 30 minutes at max, so we gotta fight now. Sorry, I can't explain further. Time is of the essence. Without another word, Nasuke rushed off to face Kaguya. As soon as they got there, she looked at them. "I thought I ended your fusion," she said. Nasuke, careful to avoid her Rinne Sharingan's gaze, spoke. "You did. But you can't keep a good fusion down." Kaguya took a deep breath and let it out slowly. "No matter, fused or not, I will destroy you." Nasuke shook his head. "Not so. Fusion wasn't the only thing that the strange being taught us. This fusion was to get our so-called power level high enough for this next technique. Get ready, Kaguya." Nasuke pulled out a rice cooker and sat it down on the ground. He proceeded to enter Sage mode on top of Nine-Tails Chakra mode with the third gate of life opened on top of it. Flipping back, Nasuke entered a wide stance and pushed his hand forward. Evil containment! Suddenly, Kaguya is overtaken by a massive green whirlwind, being converted into pure energy. What is this? Nasuke then used the Rinnegan to line up the shot properly and forced Kaguya into the rice cooker. As soon as she was in, Nasuke quickly closed it and locked it, and then placed the tag Fu had given them over the cooker. And with that, the battle came to a close. Nasuke sat there breathing heavily. Sakura and Kakashi rushed over to him. "You did it, Saruto!" Nasuke looked over to them and offered a thumbs up. As he sat there, he could feel how much that technique shortened his fusion time. He looked over at Sakura and Kakashi. "I only have a few moments left before the fusion ends. I'm sorry." Sakura thought about it and gulped, putting on a brave face with a smile. "It's okay. You can just fuse again, right?" Nasuke thought about it and nods. "Yeah. but to be honest, I'll probably only show up when the world's in danger. What do you mean, Sakura asks. I wasn't supposed to exist. I only exist because that guy we dealt with, he wasn't a very good guy, I don't think. He altered our timeline in a dangerous way, but all the same, I'm grateful he did. Because of his bad deeds, I got to exist, and I say that was a good thing. But now, I think it's time for me to go face the facts. I'm not supposed to be here, and I probably won't be for a long time. Sakura seemed saddened by that. Saruto, all the time we got to spend together. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. Nasuke nodded. I only wish I could have spent more time with you. I love you, Sakura. Sakura smiled. I love you too, Saruto. As they kissed though, the fusion broke and Naruto fell one way, Sasuke the other, leaving Sakura there to cope with the fact that he was gone. Tears began to run down her face. Kakashi was too busy worrying about the rice cooker, hoping that Naruto and Sasuke didn't accidentally land on it. Several weeks later, Naruto, Sasuke, Kakashi, and Sakura were both in Ichiraku Ramen. It had been some time since the end of the Fourth Shinobi World War. Jiraiya had taken the rice cooker and had it covered in concrete before placing it in a place where nobody would ever think to find it. That, they hoped, would be the end of Kaguya's threat, but just in case, they'd begin studying ways to defeat her, including learning that fusion technique from Sasuke and Naruto, as well as the sealing technique. By the way, Kakashi said, you mentioned that there was some otherworldly guy there. Tell us more about that. Naruto nodded. There was a guy with purple skin. He said he was a demon from a world not too different from our own, something he called a jump verse. He taught us the fusion ability we used against Kaguya, though he said he'd need some favors in return, Sasuke tacked on. Yeah, there was a price, wasn't there, Naruto said. Price? Sakura asked. Naruto looked back at her. To be honest, he didn't tell us. He said he'd call in an IOU later when he needed it, something to do with testing out some stuff from our world and the world where he came from. Then he disappeared. You don't suppose we've seen the last of him, do you? Kakashi asked. Sasuke sat there thinking about it. Regrettably, I don't think we have. Elsewhere, in another dimension entirely, Fu was watching this happen. Interesting. Chakra, dojutsu, ninjutsu, taijutsu, so many interesting abilities here. But I wonder what would happen if I took something from here and brought it back to my world. I wonder indeed. Maybe it's time to call in an IOU. That's the end of this series, but it could so easily spawn a brand new series if you're interested in seeing that. Maybe we could let Fu bring some stuff from the Naruto world into the Dragon Ball world. But what would he bring? And who should he give it to? I suppose you'll just have to be the ones to tell me. Let me know down in the comments below what you'd like to see him do to the Dragon Ball world using the resources he acquired from the Naruto world. And while you're at it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to be notified when that video drops. As always, here's a few more videos I think you'd be interested in, and until next time, peace.